Have you ever heard the saying that abs are made in the kitchen? Well, when it comes to sculpting a defined midsection, this definitely rings true. In this short conversation, we're going to talk about why core workouts are often a complete waste of time and what you should be doing instead to build a strong and visible abdominal wall. I suppose I'll preface this conversation by suggesting that, listen, every single person is different, and there's a myriad of reasons why we would or wouldn't need to train our core musculature. And if we're talking about any kind of injury, if we're talking about training for specific sports, the answer to should we be training the core always and with any question around nutrition and fitness is it depends, and it completely depends on the person. And so I'm just going to speak generally to the illusion that by training our core muscles, by doing more crunches, by doing more oblique twists, by doing more exercises that train the musculature around our core, and generally we'll just speak to our midsection, but frankly, our core is really everything between our hips and our shoulders. But the illusion, again, that by training these core muscles, we're going to burn more body fat around these areas, and therefore we're going to have more definition. And this simply is not the case. Just physiologically speaking, the idea of spot reduction, the idea of burning more body fat in specific areas by doing exercises that target those areas simply does not exist. And the reason for that is because, one, especially with the midsection, especially with core muscles, these are what we call, generally speaking, type 1 muscle fibers. And type 1 muscle fibers are muscle fibers that tend to not hypertrophy. They generally do not increase in size or muscle fiber amount, unlike type 2 muscle fibers. And so if you think about certain muscle groups, let's just talk about our quadriceps muscles or our glute muscles or the gastrocnemius, the outer portion of the calf muscle that tends to have more definition. These are more type 2B muscle fibers that through certain training methodology will actually increase in size. Now, with respect to that there's obviously a huge genetic component here in that every single one of us has a different amount of type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers. And so at the end of the day, what a lot of this does come down to, I hate to say it, but a lot of this does come down to is our genetics and really our just predisposition to how we store body fat and our muscle definition. There's certain people that are genetically predisposed to be long distance runners, and they have a terribly difficult time putting on any appreciable amount of muscle tissue. There's individuals who are genetically predisposed to pack on muscle mass and are genetically predisposed to be more strength athlete, more explosive type of athlete, and you try and get them to run long distances and absolutely forget about it. And so at the end of the day, with so much around health and fitness, a lot of this really does come down to genetics in terms of our predisposition to be a certain body fat, to have a certain amount of muscle tone. With that said, of course, there's always so much that can be done to move the needle in terms of body composition, in terms of improving nutrition, training methodology. And so I said that while we do have certain muscle fiber types specifically around the midsection, these muscle fibers, generally speaking, will not hypertrophy. So you can do abs all you want, but it's not going to make those muscles so big that they're going to show through a thick layer of body fat. And so what instead, like the saying, abs are made in the kitchen, what needs to happen here is you need to clean up your diet and you need to learn how to manage your nutrition in order to burn enough body fat to be able to see abdominal definition that generally exists for most people. Again, it's going to totally depend on the person. Now, because of what I just explained, the idea around doing core workouts for the sake of, one, building abdominal muscles, two, doing core exercises to lose body fat in and of itself is simply just a waste of time. And for most of us, time is an extremely valuable resource. And so if your goals are losing body fat, if your goals are getting stronger, and time is of the essence, and I don't know anyone who that isn't the case for, then your time is going to be much better spent doing more big bang exercises. So more exercises that are going to train larger muscle groups so that you can burn more calories, so that you can get more of a hormonal benefit from the training, so that you can build more lean muscle mass generally and globally throughout the body. And your time is going to be better spent in the kitchen, literally preparing meals, shopping, prepping as a means to control your calorie intake so that you can lose body fat. And at the end of the day, that's really the most important way of thinking about how to get the abdominal definition that so many people are looking for. And it's worth mentioning that there often is a high level of frustration because people do tend to lose a lot of body fat, and yet they still feel like their midsection is their quote-unquote problem area. And the reason for this, again, just coming down to genetics, is we all store body fat differently. And so you might very well be someone that stores more body fat around your midsection, which means it's simply going to take longer than other areas of the body for all of that body fat to come off. But just know it will over time, and you need to make sure that you're giving it enough time. So the best way to determine how it's coming off, if it's coming off, is to take circumference measurements. So my suggestion is, if you're making a concerted effort to lose body fat, then I would suggest using a tape measure. Use it in centimeters, and you will literally take measurements every couple weeks. 1, around your belly button. 2, around your hips. And then if you want to get a little more fancy with it, what we typically do with clients is we will have them also take measurements 2 inches above the belly button and 2 inches below the belly button. Just because these areas can change for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes for females, depending on their menstrual cycle, they'll be more bloated. And we just want more data points to truly be able to see the trends and the trajectory of the processes that we're putting into place. And so that, in a nutshell, is really kind of the idea around why, quote unquote, core training is actually making concerted time to go to the gym just to do crunches and sit-ups and side planks and all of these proverbial core exercises might not be the best use of time. However, let's talk about how to leverage core exercises briefly in a way that does make sense. Because I think for most people, because we sit so much, I think there's definitely a case to be made about implementing exercises that are going, in fact, help strengthen the core musculature and prevent injury at the end of the day, to say nothing of body composition. So first and foremost, the way that we want to look at this is by implementing big bang exercises. Exercises that require your core muscles to work throughout movements. And so the big bang exercises, we could talk about squatting, deadlifting, lunging, pressing exercises, pulling exercises, bending, so hinging at the hips, twisting, all of these types of exercises that work large muscle groups, the quads, the hamstrings, the glutes, the back, the upper back, the chest, the shoulders, are going to inadvertently work the core muscles. Now, I mentioned how the core muscles are type 1 muscle fibers. And the reason they're type 1 muscle fibers and the way type 1 muscle fibers often work is not to provide these massive contractions, but instead to provide stability to the body. So if you can imagine doing a lunge, if you lunge out forward and lunge back, well, yes, you're training the glutes, you're training the quads. However, you're also activating, hopefully, the abdominal muscles between the transverse abdominis, between the lower abdominal muscles, the erector spinae, so the back muscles, the obliques. These are muscles that run diagonally from your ribs down to your hips, and so on and so forth. And so this is the way that we want to be able to train these muscles. So when we do core exercises, often the way that we implement them is through more stability type training, or as some people call it, more in this quote unquote functional term, is more anti-rotation exercises. This is something like a pal-off press, like a plank with maybe an arm lift or a leg lift, some types of stability exercises like this. And so the way in which we would typically program these exercises in would usually be at the end of more full body workouts or joint specific workouts. So say we do an upper push-pull workout, we might plug in 1 or 2 core exercises at the end of the workout. Same thing with a lower body workout. We might plug in 1 or 2 exercises at the end that are going to train some aspect of anti-rotation. So think of something like a pal-off press. We might do some form of a plank variation that requires some stability or some moving stability. We might do some flexion exercise that's either training upper or lower abs. So you can think about some form of a crunch variation or a lower abdominal exercise like a Garhammer raise. And then we certainly implement a lot of back exercises in the form of extensions. So horizontal back extensions, 45-degree back extensions, reverse hyperextensions, all of these types of exercises that train the back, specifically the lower back, are fundamental to keep us strong and healthy and injury-free. And so that is the way that I would suggest implementing core exercises. Otherwise, if you're working in the gym to get stronger, to get leaner, hopefully you're also working in the kitchen and managing your calorie intake to ensure that you are in fact in a calorie deficit. And by virtue of doing that, you're going to be losing body fat. If you're taking measurements around your midsection every couple weeks, making sure that things are in fact moving, then continue to stay the course. And you don't need to be spending a whole tremendous amount of time doing all of these quote unquote core exercises to try and burn body fat, because it's simply not going to happen. And so that's just my short little spiel on core training and why you don't need to be wasting your time in the gym doing full core training workouts or doing thousands of crunches at the end of your workout session that are doing nothing but straining your neck. If you have any questions about this, make sure to let me know. If you feel like you need more individualized guidance about your training programs or about your nutrition plans so that you can build the abdominal definition that you are looking for, then we can definitely help. Just shoot me a message, ben@BSLNutrition.com, or go ahead and schedule a free nutrition strategy call at the link here in the show notes. Hope that's helpful for you. I'll catch you guys in the next episode.